I mean, I think most everybody has an inherent desire to succeed and
Yep.
do well. So as you mentioned, you want to recognize those opportunities, but then there's going to be the other side of the coin where something's not going well, something's not working right, and you have to address that.
Yep.
And it's not to be punitive or anything of that nature. You're doing that person a service if you're telling them something's not right. You need to do this. You need to do that. Let's try this. Let's change that. And I know for myself, I would want that in return, right? So
Sure.
letting somebody go down a path with no interaction or feedback that says you're not exactly hitting the right mark and then just shutting it down that's difficult, right?
It is.
So
Yeah.
you don't want to do that to somebody. That's one of the best training things I think I've ever gone through was something called crucial conversations. Probably a lot of people have heard of it, but
Mm.
it's so simplistic in its approach, but it gives you that basic tool of, okay, how I've got to have a difficult conversation. What are the ways of doing that make it better instead of worse, right? That make it a
Yeah.
successful outcome, allows somebody to listen
Mm.
and hear what you're trying to tell them, right? So it's
Exactly.
it's a little bit more to it, right, than just saying, I don't mind saying something hard to somebody. Well, why don't you try and say it hard to them in a way that it helps them and doesn't
Yes.
just beat them down or something of that nature, right?
Well, you're absolutely right, because at the end of the day, and it's happened to all of us. When you get beat on, and it just you just tune them out. And
Right.
then what do you get from it? Well, maybe I heard a third of what you've said, maybe, and now I really don't like you. My motivation's kind of shot. It's like, I hope you get whacked. It's all bad. It's all bad stuff. So, yeah, and I see it with my own children. How do you get a child to do something, especially a teenager? it's like a that's like a negotiation art unto itself. But yeah, they're to your point, finding a way to communicate what will help make them better so that they can be successful. Because I think you're right. I think people do want to do a good job. I think people do try to bring their A game to work every day.
Welcome to the Inner Genius Podcast with Joe Patch IV.
I want to welcome everyone back to another episode of the Inner Genius Podcast. I'm excited to be back again today with my special guest, Aaron Mosley. Aaron, how you doing today?
Doing good, Joe. How are you doing this morning?
Doing great. Thank you. Thank you. I think you guys are in for a treat today. Aaron is a fantastic guy. I mean, heck, he's an Aggie, right? I mean, there can't be anything wrong with this guy, right? So, no, I love Texas A&M, near and dear to my heart. But no, I'm excited to have you on today, Aaron. I really am. You and I have had a chance to talk about, work and projects over the last year. And I think you got a lot going for you. You're working some exciting projects right now, looking to making some transitions here over the summer. But yeah, I really wanted to have you on because I wanted to pick your brain today. As a senior project controls manager, you've been out in the field, you've been with Zachary for a long time. You've seen a lot of really, really interesting stuff over the years. So I'm really excited to have you here to be able to pick your brain a little bit and talk about the work, the space, and kind of how you do it. And in my opinion, why you stand taller than the rest and how you knock it out. So appreciate you being with us today.
You're good. Glad to be here, Joe.
So talk to us a little bit. How did you get into the space? How did you kind of get into what you're doing now? Yeah, was it something from your childhood? Was it young adult? What brought you to where you are?
Well, my dad has been in construction for a long time. He's retired now, but had a long background in construction. As you mentioned, I went to A&M and came from there with an information and operations degree, so kind of a combination business and management, right?
Okay.
So one of the places that I interviewed coming out of A&M was with Zachary, and it seemed like project controls was such a solid fit for that kind of a training and background, and it was just interesting to me. So it was a natural fit going to a company that I was very familiar with, just from my dad's experience,
Mm-hmm.
and the nature of the work that they were offering was interesting to me. So
Yeah.
that started coming straight out of A&M.
Okay. Okay. Right from the get go. Then, yeah. What kind of construction was your father in?
Same industrial construction. So
Yeah.
he had an electrical engineering background,
Okay.
had done some work in that regard, but then came to Zachary himself as well, right? And
Oh wow. All right.
so a lot of power projects and different things that were in their portfolio at that time.
Wow. Okay. Okay. So you grew up kind of hearing some, a little bit at the dinner table kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. That's the same with me. You know, my dad's a civil PE and did a lot of power work. So yeah, growing up at the table, I thought that was the only thing going on in the world at most suppers. So, you know, it's like you don't know anything different. But anyway, that's good. No, but the history is good. You know, having those rich conversations, certainly looking back over the career, you know, I think the great career you've had to date, that's kind of cool. And not to mention, you know, you kind of talk shop with dad. So that's,
Well, definitely do that. I remember before
yeah,
being in the industry, wondering and asking. I mean, they'd say there were however many hundreds of people on the project, and with him being a project manager, I remember asking him, how do you manage hundreds and hundreds of people? You know, thinking at that time, a long time ago, like he was individually doing that all by himself. So how can that even happen? But of course, now thinking there's such a team involved, right? And
right. Yeah.
to be a leader of those teams, but it's
Yeah.
interesting to learn about all that after the
Yeah.
fact.
No, no. You know what? Tell us a little bit about, you know, I mean, you're obviously you're steeped in project controls. You know, what is it? You know, for those that don't know what project controls do, you know, they don't know anything about earned value, they don't know anything about scheduling, et cetera. You know, how could you kind of peel it apart and explain kind of what it is you do and how you do it, and then what about it really resonates with you? What is it that you really like about it?
So at a high level, it's a sense of organizing the chaos, if you will,
Mhm.
right? Because every project's different, and even though there's similarities, there's events that take place that you can't foresee, and to have the role in project controls of establishing a mechanism that can account for that and
Mhm.
prepare for that, and on a routine, whether it be daily, weekly, or monthly basis, to convey that understanding to others, whether they're on site or off site, wherever they might reside, and being able to give them that version of the truth, that understanding of project status
Yeah.
is a tall order, right? It's a big task, but it's one that I enjoy, and I think a misconception of project controls might be that they're just data guys, you know, just gatherers and reporters.
Mhm.
To me, that's more of a step one. You know,
Mhm.
that's the minimum of what a project controls group should do. That's where you start.
Okay.
But that should be step one that only leads to analysis, you know, forecasting, trending, and proactive engagement to help eliminate some of those problems that you can see coming, right?
Sure, sure, sure. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the projects, my background, industrial power as well. Um, you're right. I mean, I was talking about your father. The projects can get big. A lot of people running around. A lot of subs, a lot of competing schedules, competing footprints. On project sites. You can't always put 3 or 4 people in the same spot on the same day, and it's incredibly complex. I mean, I have a lot of respect for what you do, and for people that are very good at what you do, because it's always changing every single day, and that status is super super critical, as it relates not only to the work but any to the change orders, and certainly back to the money. Where are you? How complete are we? Not kind of what do you think we're complete, and this is what we ought to get paid, but this is what we've tracked, and these are the metrics that would substantiate, right, that particular argument. But you're right, kind of getting a sense of that chaos, making order of it. But on these big projects, it's like a permutation, so
Mhm.
many changing things every single day. So to be able to keep up with that it's indispensable to running a good project, in my opinion. Good project controls manager, and you're in great shape on a project.
I agree. I think that credibility is the backbone of that whole exercise, because you can do everything right, you can have everything available,
Mhm.
and inevitably the information will come into question for whatever reason, whether
Mhm.
it's bad news or what have you. You know, people want to test the information, and if it's found lacking for any particular reason, then your credibility starts to wane,
Yeah.
and it's not going to be relied upon. And that's a pitfall of project controls. You have to stay on top of that, always be pushing ahead of those challenges to make sure you're ready to answer them.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. You lose the credibility, and then it's like anything else in life. How can I trust the numbers, or trust where you're going with the conversation? That's the other thing I think about project controls that I really respect is the consistency. I think it's hard for a lot of people to be consistent. I mean, I struggle with consistency. Doing the same things, every day that you should be doing. I mean, every day has variability, but doing the big things every day, it can get hard. It gets monotonous after a while. But, this is one aspect of the project where I have a lot of respect for that consistency, because it has to be there and it builds on itself. So it's not like you can get it right for the first 3 or 4 months and then take a break and then come back and reconcile in month 6. And I think we're close, and it's like, kind of doesn't work like that, So I have a lot of respect for that. That's tricky. For sure.
Right. The consistency generates the underlying processes that support that consistency. So processes, procedures, write-ups, documentation, everything that helps the team follow the right steps day after day, as you mentioned, is what helps create that environment, right? So you can have that ready feedback.
Right. Tell us a little bit about the project that you're on, you're on right now, and even some of the, we can dovetail into some of the work you've done with Zachary as well. But, to give the audience kind of an understanding of the scope and the size and the, the type of work that you've done.
Sure. So 20 years with Zachary, it had an interesting, I think a fortunate progression of work, right? So kind of coming back into some of those early jobs, they were, I think maybe in the current market, a much smaller scope, right? I'll say first about $30 million, right? So today, to me, that's a subcontract, right?
Sure.
But at that time, that was our whole job.
Okay.
So it was a good learning environment, though. I got involved in a lot of things. So I was looking back, I noticed that pretty much every project that I had been on was different in terms of what type of job it was. So AQCS, the air quality type of jobs, I did one of those. Did a cement job, power project, chemical factory, refinery, LNG, and now this one here is another refinery type of a plant. So this one's a little different in terms of being primarily modular, so offshore, right? So that was interesting. We had 2 halves of this project, where the first half was just prepping the site, foundations, and basically everything ready to receive those modules. And then here they are, and then you have a short period of time to connect them and make them ready to operate and turn them over to commissioning. So it's a little different, right? And this one big difference between CTCI, at least right now, versus Zachary was primarily lump sum and direct hire.
Okay.
The project controls was much more embedded and integrated, and of course, hands-on with that information. Whereas here, it's been managing these subs, managing their controls teams, and then kind of transforming that into this, when modules were here, having a more direct hands of building up the team and running our own business more like I was used to, right?
Okay.
And so it's been an interesting, and within one project, being kind of CM or construction management over others, and then transforming the site into a more, we still have the subs doing the field work, but more direct management of our project controls business.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting. I think you brought up a good point. I think there's everybody wants to get on the big jobs. You hear that, and I think especially for younger folks too. You want the big job, you want the exposure, the visibility that comes with a big job. And I get it, but I think you made a really good point. I think sometimes the smaller jobs can be the best, because you have that ability, it almost seems like, to, and I've seen this in my career as well, where you're able to sort of touch and influence and be influenced, I think in a good way, by different aspects of the job that you would never get exposure to on big jobs. And so I wonder if in some way it seasons you and makes you better, and I mean, I look at you and what you've accomplished, and I think to myself, that was an indispensable part of what you're able to do today, and how you're able to manage, so effectively and keep the team on point, because you were able to pick up those skills that, quite frankly, on the big jobs, you kind of have to stay in your lane. There's too many other things going on,
That's very accurate. I mean, I've recognized that a string of 3 projects, where one was a basic, what I would call a basic hour job. It was kind of bread and butter. Everything the company had built and was able to do was geared around that size of a project. And then the next project was 5 times larger than that in scale. And pretty much everything that we had available to us would start to fail, right? We just wouldn't be able to manage it. So we had to adapt and develop and overcome on that project. And we did. and that would be a success story for me and the team on that side. But that only being able to go through that challenge was enabled me to do the next one, which was that LNG job, which was 5 times larger than the previous one, right? So if I had gone from our run-of-the-mill basic average size job straight into that LNG, would have been incredibly difficult to have to make all those advancements in one project. So the growth opportunities, I think, are there.
Yeah, I agree. I'm glad you elaborated on that a little bit. I see that as you look back and you say to yourself, well, I'm glad it played out the way it did, because I mean, you mentioned it earlier, talking about getting site prep done, foundations. If you got the right foundation, you can put the load on it. But if the foundation's weak, i.e. the experience and your ability to manage, certain number of complex issues simultaneously is not where it needs to be, then yeah, things can go sideways pretty quick, and that's never good. Tell me a little bit about one of the things I was fascinated about on this particular project is the modular component to it.
Mhm.
So these and maybe you can give us a little more detail. These were all fabricated in China, is that right?
Yeah, the bulk of the large modules were in China, and there was a few smaller like pipe racks that were done in Mexico.
In Mexico. So how because you hear a lot about modular today, and I was on a podcast here a couple of months ago with a gentleman. We're talking about some modular components for the kind of work that he does. So how was that different? How was it good, bad, kind of good, bad, and ugly? How did that play out for you? I mean, that's really interesting to.
Yeah. So it is interesting. And again, background being normally you would have the long duration schedule, you'd have all your people on site and be monitoring the work firsthand. So
Right.
it's much different to realize that the bulk of this work is happening elsewhere. Others are managing it. And pretty much all you can do from this end of it is monitor that and kind of target the arrival and be ready to receive it, right?
Right.
What happens then, I'm sure it's different on every instance of these modular projects that are more and more common, is you have an understanding of what you're going to get. And then you really find out what you got, right? How much did it get done? Was it done correctly? Was it complete? So you have different discovery processes that you have to go through. To be more specific somewhat, we had an anticipation of merely having to reinstate these modules, meaning reassemble the parts that had to be removed for shipping, right?
Okay.
That was a small amount in retrospect to what it has become.
Okay.
So then there's carryover work, which means it's a polite way of saying, here's all the stuff that didn't get done, right? And so that carries over to the site, right? And we had some announcement of what those items were that were coming, and that was again only a portion. And then there's the discovery part. So just to put it in broad terms, that later part that we hadn't anticipated having to do has become 3 and 4 times the amount of work that was originally planned as just that pure reinstatement portion, right?
Wow.
So it was a very aggressive recovery effort to get the team mobilized, bring in extra subcontractors for this additional work, create the flexibility and opportunities to attack this, because there is no relief on the amount of time to complete. So doing 3 or 4 times the amount of work in the same amount of time.
Wow, that's huge. That is really, really huge. And to add to that, did you have delays because of COVID? Were there?
Honestly, we had I'd say some impacts in terms of people being out. We had some periods where the site was shut down, but predominantly it stayed working.
Okay.
And it just sort of became a portion of the absenteeism, if you will, for people that had to go into quarantine. Did not, at least as of yet, put in any kind of force majeure. So interesting enough. But
oh wow, okay.
Still keep working.
Real, and even how about the delivery schedule of the modules? Were they were still able to meet delivery schedule despite the last year?
So I'd say no, unfortunately. Okay. So that our end date stayed the same. Our receipt of those moved several months.
Yeah.
Multiple times the amount of work and less time at the end of the days. Yeah, I don't know if that's how they all go, but I imagine that's isn't the only one that's gone this way. But
wow.
Yeah. So
wow. What a baptism by fire in a way, though, if you think about it. I mean, here, you're you're experiencing kind of this modular work on a massive scale, from foreign countries, and those always have their challenges. You get, hit with the kind of a pandemic, which can affect the delivery, obviously, of the equipment, any material supply, plus your own labor force gets impacted by this, here in the United States. And the answer is yes, to hold that schedule, buddy, right? Hold the end date. And wow, that is super, super tricky. I wasn't aware of that on the backside. That's really, really impressive. What do you, kind of looking back, what was the one or two things that you guys did that you really think were the kind of the key to being able to keep everything on track? Because that gets hugely complex. Like I said in the beginning, and you know this better than I do because you're the expert. But big projects. I mean, there's things can go sideways at any point in time, and there's so many competing elements. I mean, just keeping it together is a lot of work, and then to be hit with something like this on top of that, that's incredible. That's incredible. What was the key to keeping it together?
I think the key is recognizing the change, right? It could have been easy and perhaps a pitfall that has hit others at times where you see the change, but you're locked into your plan and your approach, and you just keep doing what you were going to do, even though things have changed drastically. And if we had stayed with, say, one subcontractor with the amount of people that they might be able to bring and just tried to power through it, it wouldn't have happened, I don't think, right? So having the team that could have the decisiveness and the foresight to say, wow, look at this, look what's happening. We have to change, we have to do something more in order to make this. And it's not easy decisions, but to go from what was a 5-10, schedule for a certain period of time and flip the switch to go 6-10s, double shifts, multiple contractors, varying contract types, and gear up people to manage that in essentially a matter of weeks, 4 to 6 weeks to really put that together. And then the modules are here.
That's incredible. That's incredible. Look, I tell you what, to me, that just speaks volumes to your capabilities. I mean, honestly, I don't think, I don't, not just anybody can step up and see that change, pivot, keep it together. That's really, really, really difficult. Again, wow, that's impressive. Really. I mean, honestly, that's impressive. Tell me, kind of go, jumping back into project controls, working big jobs. One of the questions I want to ask is, skill set. What do you think is, if you, I don't know, pop top 2, top 3? I mean, what are the best skills that you need to be, super successful, be an expert like yourself in this particular space? What are those?
So as everybody comes up through the ranks, you're at one point, you're on the keyboard, you're hands-on, you're doing the calculations, building the tools, answering the questions and responding in that way.
Right.
So progressing through those jobs and going up in position, one piece of advice was, be able to delegate and be able to manage, right? So I've seen it, and we've all perhaps seen it, as people move up, they don't let go of being that frontline doer.
Yep.
And I've definitely have recognized, and was forced to, right, honestly, again, through that growth process of large projects, that any one particular thing that I just felt nobody could do but me,
sure,
took the time away from me to help perhaps 5 or 6, 7, 8 other people do what they needed to do,
right,
and therefore not be as productive, right? So I think, delegating and managing, which I think people that don't understand that might think that's just a way of saying, I'm not going to do any work. Well, that's not really the case. You're enabling other people to do the important, frontline work.
Yeah.
And you're looking ahead of them. You're planning ahead for them, paving the way for them so the team can be successful, right?
Yeah.
Not as an individual, don't have specific tasks I'm responsible for, right? But don't let them overrun paying attention to your team and keeping them effective, motivated, and working, right?
Yeah. I appreciate that. That's great advice. I think that resonates with everybody. I mean, it certainly does with me. I mean, because I think that can be one of our biggest Achilles heels. You get into doing what you do, you get pretty good at it. And it's hard. It's hard to let go because, I don't know if they're going to do it as good as me, right? I don't know if they can see around that corner that I can see. I've worked a project like this some point in the past, and I've seen something similar, and I know how to address this particular issue. And I think it all comes from a good place. It really, really does. You know, I don't think it's pride, but yeah, that ability to sort of let go, because you do have the ability, the foresight, to kind of, you know, you get the guy with the machete out, you know, clearing the path for everybody so they can, you know, they can walk behind you and get to where you need to go. Someone's got to do that, and that's not easy. So yeah, it's a great reminder. I mean, I like that. Yeah.
I think too, being able to make sure and intentionally listen to your people, right? So it develops that trust factor, so that when they are out there trying to do their best for you, and they have challenges, that they know that they can and should come and talk to you about them. I mean, I think it's a job that I can think back on being in that role. Multiple times people say, well, where's that thing by your door where I can take a number so I can get in line? Because there's usually steady stream of traffic to come in and ask for information or advice or whatever.
Sure.
To me, that's a good sign. That means I'm adding value. People are coming and seeking out my input.
Sure.
But for your people directly, if they can't come in and see that you stop whatever it is you might be doing and turn and look at them and listen to what they're saying,
right,
and give them the information and response and it's a decision to go forward with,
right,
again, you're hampering their abilities and you're hurting the project. So, you know, being intentional with listening and helping them out.
Yeah, no, I like that. I mean, again, I think that's great advice, you know, and I think everybody realizes if someone's living in the office and they obviously don't know what they're doing, that we need to part ways. But I know what you're speaking to. If you have a question or a comment or a concern, or you come up against something that you haven't seen, to be able to sit down and to extract the wisdom that you've got, the experience that you've got, to help keep them on the right path, and, you know, kind of be like a catalyst, right? Get them going. That's super powerful. Because then you know, again, if you keep the momentum of the team moving, you can accomplish all kinds of great things. It's not, what do they say? There's no I in team, you know, it's no one's done it on their own. Everybody needs a helping hand at some point. So,
Right.
yeah. Well, kind of speaking in that same vein, you know, talk to us about, you know, what do you think your biggest lesson learned was, you know, on a project, whether it was a big success that you encountered and there were some things or some elements that distilled from it that really left an impact on you. You know, maybe it was a project, you know, it was, I don't want to say a failure, but it was, you know, a big learning curve. You ran into kind of a buzzsaw and you walked away with something that's kind of stayed with you to date. I love to ask these type of questions because they're always cool stories. But they're always so impactful. They define the individual, and we all have them. I'm kind of curious what yours is.
Okay, so yeah, I think it's almost a tale of two projects, perhaps, right? But
Sure.
the project I referred to earlier, I had an opportunity to come from that power job and be at the front end of this, at that time, Zachary's largest project that they had done.
Okay.
So you had that mode of rethinking and anticipating as best as we could what it would require. It was, it's definitely, I think, my favorite success story in terms of having the opportunity to come in up front, pick the best people that were available to come there, and assemble that team,
right,
and do a lot of intentional things. We had, you know, several day long team building exercises with the rest of the project team to kind of introduce to them who we were and what we would do for them.
Okay.
So that connection, but also within the team itself. I still remember just having that core group together and saying we're going to talk about each other, because instead of discovering it through 5-minute conversations over the next 6 to 9 months, when you lose the opportunity, we're going to get it all out on the table now, and we're going to know who we are and what we can do. So I started talking, and however long I talked, it was maybe longer than anybody wanted to hear, but I put it all out there on the table, led the way on that. And everybody, when they started, they were, well, I'm not going to have that much to say, and then they all talked longer than I did. I think people wanted to express who they were and share what they could do. And I really feel like that brought that team together and gave us that kickstart to get past that learning curve of who we are and just get to being able to do it.
Yeah.
So that was, to me, the foundation, starting point, and opportunity to build that team. That project was successful, and our efforts were recognized as adding value. So that was a big deal. So leaving that project and going to the next one, which again, as I mentioned, was that much larger than the previous, wasn't quite the same mode. it wasn't just starting out. It had been going on for a year or two, this
Okay.
LNG project. And they were making a change in management for the project controls group. So much different scenario, right? Having to learn there's an established team here. Now I saw things I wanted to change and do and work through that. But there's a lot of personnel challenges in terms of who was being effective, who wasn't. Was there enough people there? Do we need to get more? So a lot of things to have to work through and doing it on the fly while you have a client who's expecting the results are already happening. They've already got a backlog, potentially a disappointment to have to work through, right? So you can see the difference between those two efforts. And I will say, I think they were both successful at the end of the day. So kind of coming back towards maybe where did a version of failure occur? So I had an opportunity on that job to sort of step outside of project controls where they said, let's get you into some new areas and opportunities. So it was undefined, right? So I learned from a little bit of this, say I maybe need to watch out for opportunities that are undefined, and how can you manage your success if you don't really know what the expectations are and the opportunity is. So it was, so the notion came up, and then it was after a few weeks of no real task or definition, hey, you're in charge of this. And it was basically the insulation scope of the project, right, which was huge. Piping on that job was significant. It was large in size. You had hot and cold insulation, so it was very complex.
Wow.
It already wasn't going well, so it comes the hot potato, right? So, but asked for the opportunity, and I wanted to meet the challenge. I said, hey, I don't really know that much about insulation in terms of an installer, know how to track it and so forth, but this will be new for me. I'll probably come in with how I've done things in the past. And, if I'm not getting where I need to be with what you want, let me know.
Sure.
So I feel like I sought out feedback, didn't get much feedback. And then at some point, it ran its course and they made another change. And to me, that felt like failure because I couldn't get wherever they wanted it to be. And what I learned was they were looking for somebody to basically drive the work in the field. I'm thinking, well, then, had I understood that, maybe I would have expressed, I'm not sure I'm the general foreman guy running crews in the field that you might be thinking needs to be working this. So it was very odd, right? I mean, the lesson learned from that is, make sure and understand what people are looking for and what they're asking for. Otherwise you may get in a situation where they don't really explain it. You don't really understand what they're looking for. I think we made a lot of improvements in that area. Maybe I was a stepping stone towards getting it where it needed to be. And they just needed somebody else for that last piece, right? But it was still a lesson for me to understand how that transpired.
Wow, those are two great stories. I mean, I got two big takeaways actually. So I appreciate you sharing that. That's I think that I think it's a good point. You talk about kind of a lack of scope or lack of definition, undefined, the word that you used. And I think those can be very, very tricky. And I know that's something that we do, on the recruiting side is we try to bring, that crystal clear definition to our clients on, this is what you think you want or you think you need, and you've got reasons to substantiate it. But, are we really sure? Have you considered, the consequences of what it is that you're talking about? Have you considered some things that we have in mind that maybe haven't entered into your thinking process that we should address to sort of tighten things up a little bit? Because it's tough. It's tough when the expectations are kind of all over the map to really hit the mark. It's it's kind of like shooting an arrow at the target in the dark. It's not good odds. But I also think the other thing that goes with what you said that I think is a great piece of advice on that same lane, and I think good for everybody to hear. And I'd say especially younger men and women coming up in the ranks is, are you kind of playing into your strengths? And it's happened to me early in my career. I was put on an assignment where they thought I could excel, but I knew inside, like, man, this is not my sweet spot. And I'm not saying, you got to stay only on your strengths. Although I do think there's a lot of value in really continuing to refine your strengths and, leaning on your strengths and have someone else help you with where you're weak. I mean, obviously we got to work on our weaknesses as well, but clearly where I was kind of like yourself, they put me in the wrong lane, and I kind of knew it. I was young. I didn't say much. I thought, hey, we could kind of power through this. But clearly expectations were not on the same page. And it wasn't, honestly, it wasn't my skill set. I was not very good at that. And I didn't do very well at all. And the tricky part with that too is, are you not good, or are you just not good at that?
Right.
And that's where things can get muddy too, because if you don't perform well, but you're outside the lane, well, I think logic would say that, well, that should be expected. It's not that you're not a talented individual and you can't be successful and a massive asset to our firm. It's just, we put the square peg in the round hole. And so I think it's something that's important to always think about. I think perhaps where we are is certainly younger coming in, to have that proper sense of definition and clarity, and being true to yourself, is really important. The other thing I think you said that I really, really like, and you don't see it all the time, but I have seen it, and where I've seen it, it's been brilliant. And so I wasn't surprised when you talked about you're establishing your team. You're moving with intent. You're getting everybody to sit down and kind of talk about, who we are, what we're doing. Let's all get on the kind of the same page. But I've noticed that when a leader opens the door to themselves and is very honest, shares who they are, again, the good, the bad, and the ugly, it does bring about, I believe, a profound change to the team, because then they feel safe, right? They can open up the door. They can talk about themselves again, some of the things they've done well, maybe some misses that they've made, and kind of share kind of who they are. I think once that chemistry comes together, phenomenal things are truly, truly possible. These collection of people that didn't quite know each other, maybe there's these barriers, have really blended and become a bit of a family, and they go to the wall for each other, and they start to read each other's minds a little bit, and they have great trust in their leader, which is you, knowing that at the end of the day, you got their back and you're always available. Again, I haven't seen it a ton, but where I've seen it, it's been brilliant. So I appreciate you sharing that, because I think that's a trait a lot of leaders. I just think it's important. I really do. So yeah, what a great story. I appreciate that.
It was a fun project in that sense, and had a vested interest really in, obviously, the success of the project, but also these individual people. I mean, they came to do their best, and they wanted to be recognized for that, and I enjoyed that opportunity as well when the project was going well.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess another thought too within that is, you have to build that interaction up front when when the project is easy. There's no easier day on a project than the first day. Well, maybe the last day when you're leaving, right? But you can't bring it together when it's easy. You won't survive and succeed when it's hard, right? So you really have to be on solid ground to be able to weather those storms, right? But as we did go through those processes, and they were succeeding and things were going well, it was my favorite thing to do, to be able to blast out an email throughout the organization and recognize either somebody for something that they did, or acknowledge the team's efforts. And it was always like the feedback too from the management leadership of the company to be excited about that too. And then the energy that they put into the team, that was the best part, I think, of the whole thing.
No, I love it. No, I really do. I mean, that's just great leadership. It really is at the end of the day. I mean, looking out for the people, recognizing, I think that's important. I think people need to get an attaboy when you do a good job. It's easy. We see it all the time. People can be very critical. I know I can be critical at times too. And it's easy to pick out all the misses and the mistakes and what happened and why didn't you see this, et cetera. But I think it's very important to go back and recognize when people do a good job. For me, and I think all of us in our own way, it goes a long ways. That's all good stuff. I mean, these are great lessons. I mean, these can be applied, obviously in the work that we do, and certainly many other spaces. And I think that was key too. You mentioned, getting the team kind of on the same page early. That's the thing about, I would say, engineering and construction, and, certainly anything industrial, oil, gas, power, whether it's renewable or not. I think you learn it early. For me, when I worked, when I was going through school on the Ship Channel, I worked on a couple oil and gas projects, and it's what would you say, Aaron? I mean, it can be aggressive at times, to put it mildly.
Right.
But that's the business. You're going to grind. It's going to get loud at times. You're going to have spirited discussions with client people on the team. That's just kind of the nature of the work. And I think the people that are successful in this space are ones that can get comfortable recognizing that there is an ebb and a flow. But I think one of the best things too, and I know you've seen this as well, and probably more than me, is that at the end of a job, it's the fact that you fought a lot of battles together. Every day wasn't cordial and nice and sweet, and you know what I'm talking about. But yeah, something about the end of the job is like, man, we fought some battles. We had some moments, but we got through. We got the job knocked out. We won, and it's like you're stronger and better for it. And that's just something I think you see in our space that you don't see in a lot of other spaces. I think.
I mean, I think most everybody has an inherent desire to succeed and do well. So as you mentioned, you want to recognize those opportunities, but then there's going to be the other side of the coin where something's not going well, something's not working right. And, you have to address that. Yep. And it's not to be punitive or anything of that nature. You're doing that person a service if you're telling them something's not right. You need to do this, you need to do that. Let's try this, let's change that. And I know for myself, I would want that in return, right? So letting somebody go down a path with no interaction or feedback that says you're not exactly hitting the right mark, and then just shutting it down that's difficult, right?
It is.
Yeah. You don't want to do that to somebody. That's one of the best training things I think I've ever gone through was something called Crucial Conversations. Probably a lot of people have heard of it, but it's so simplistic in its approach, but it gives you that basic tool of, okay, how I've got to have a difficult conversation. What are the ways of doing that make it better instead of worse, right? That make it a successful outcome, allows somebody to listen and hear what you're trying to tell them, right? So it's, it's a little bit more to it, right? Than just saying, I don't mind saying something hard to somebody. Well, why don't you try and say it hard to them in a way that it helps them and doesn't just beat them down or something of that nature, right?
Well, you're absolutely right, because at the end of the day, and it's happened to all of us, when you get beat on and it just you just tune them out, and then what do you get from it? Well, maybe I heard a third of what you've said, maybe, and now I really don't like you. My motivation's kind of shot. It's like, I hope you get whacked. It's all bad. It's all bad stuff. So, and I see it with my own children. How do you get a child to do something, especially a teenager? That's like a negotiation art unto itself. But yeah, they're to your point, finding a way to communicate what will help make them better so that they can be successful. Because I think you're right. I think people do want to do a good job. I think people do try to bring their A game to work every day. I really do. I think people are good people. Most time people are really good and want to do their best, and you just want to help them kind of get to that next level. So, and I think people see that in time, right? Certainly when they see the situation play out and they see the advice that you gave them, the corrective action as being, that was it. I see it now. Thank you. They'll come around in time. So, yeah. Well, we're running low on time. So I got one more question I want to throw out there real quick. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received, personal or professional? I mean, this is kind of an insight to you. Just what do you want to share with us? What's something that resonates, that you kind of go back to time and time again, that's been really helpful?
Perhaps it's twofold, but I'll try and kind of blend them together. But first thing that comes to mind is just to more or less remain calm. When you have a situation, you pretty much lose your audience, or you lose your own ability to rationally address the situation if you just get emotional or energetic about it. You're just wasting that energy. And I've recognized that, and you mentioned it too. When somebody's maybe just berating you, you tune them out.
Yep.
So if you're having an interaction, whether it's with an employee, a manager, or a client, and the situation is tense, if you just start getting hot about it, it usually doesn't turn out very well.
Yep.
So I think there's a lot of scenarios where that plays in. So alongside that, I would say to just always kind of think outside of your box a little bit, right? I know that's a bit of a cliche, but I can take it back to that example of, going into maybe a subcontracting space on that insulation assignment. But even though it didn't turn out the way I wanted it to, even if there was a little period of where, man, I wish I hadn't done that, afterwards, now I can say, I am glad that that happened. And I'm glad that I did that because,
Mhm.
It's wonderful to be able to go through life and have string after a string of successes, right? And that'd be wonderful. That's what everybody would want. But watch that person who has had 10 successes in a row and then hand them a failure
Yeah.
that they might not have experienced. What happens to them, right? Can they deal with it? So
Yeah.
I'm say I had all successes prior to that, but I'll say I feel like I was on a good path, and then I hit that, and I struggled with it, but I've reconciled with and understand how you learn from those failures, right? So
Mhm.
I think that's the other piece, right? Is don't be afraid to get involved in things, maybe not to an absurd point, right? Make sure you know your capacity and what your abilities are, but
Sure. Sure.
branch out, get involved. And having done that has prepared me, as everything does, right? All your life experiences bring you to
Yep.
more ability. So on this job now, I feel as I'm more able to get involved in things outside because of that experience to doing something that wasn't maybe perhaps purely project controls.
Yeah. 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 No, it's a great piece of advice. I appreciate you, you sharing that. I mean, you've given us a lot to chew on today, Aaron. I appreciate it. This has been very enjoyable conversation with you. I think you've given a lot of good stuff to think about. I know that's one of the things. I love getting this. What do I say? Front row seat to the action. You get to hear all kinds of good stuff. So definitely walking away with some real nuggets today. So appreciate you making the time to be with us today on the podcast. What's the best way to get in touch with you, real quick? Is it on LinkedIn? Is that the best way if someone wants to ask you a question or follow up, on this particular interview?
Sure. We got the, profile on LinkedIn, got the email, phone number on there as well.
Okay. Okay. And we'll link some of that stuff too, as well, on the write up when we post the show on YouTube. So we'll have that available. So again, thank you for your time and being with us today. And I just want to remind everybody, there's an inner genius inside of all of us. It's up to you to discover it, harness it, and share it with the world. So the real question is this: what's your inner genius?
My inner genius, I think, is just being that people person to make everybody else as much as they can be, and that it sums up in the team aspect, right? But I really believe in that. It's not an individual game; it's a team game, and if you can enable the team, that's what creates the magic.
Yeah, I agree. 100%. I appreciate, you again, making the time to be with us today. This is a good show. Yeah. Thank you very much.
I enjoyed it, Joe. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
This is the Padua Podcast Network. PaduaPodcastNetwork.com.